Alright, hello everyone, and welcome to my channel. We do educational videos over here, kind of trying to lay down the curriculum that I would use if I were putting together a school. So I've done so far maybe 1150 videos on different topics, but concentrating on ancient Egyptian tree of life, Dewey Larson's reciprocal system of theory, and the reciprocal church, which is for putting together spiritual resources. Basically, these are theories of everything, all-encompassing theories, grand unified theories, something that you can like hang your head on for everything that every instance in your life. And we try to focus on the most complete theories of everything, but also magnum opuses and tour de forces and earth-shattering discoveries from obscure sources that are probably not known to you. But somebody who really went for it and spent their whole life or a large chunk of their life working on something, never really got recognized, but really, like I would say, hit a home run with what they were doing, but still haven't really gotten their work out there, or they died, and now their work is on the trash heap of history. So we're trying to polish these things off and show you, the best way to use them. By really, the hardest part is just accessing these documents. Most of them are very difficult. A lot of times people are expressing things in new languages or new concepts, so they're having to come up with new words in old languages. And when you are kind of out there on your own, you don't have anything to fall back on, so you have to kind of do all the work yourself. And so sometimes it can be daunting to read these things because, sometimes these people are, they have the concepts in their head, but they might not be the best writers or more organized writers. They might be putting it down in a difficult, so you have to be very patient. You have to go through these things very slowly to kind of get the point. You might have to go through them repeatedly, and you might also have to go through documents which are frankly not good. That they're really a pain to read, but it all pays off in the long run. But sometimes the run has to be pretty long. But anyway, we are in episode 232 of the Reciprocal Church, and we're trying to amass spiritual resources that we can use pending the collapse of the Western religions, which is imminent and just waiting to happen, especially as more and more scholars recognize that it is an open and shut case that the Gospels were written by the Romans as part of a psychological operation or wartime propaganda against the Jews, who they had been fighting for over a century, off and on, mostly on, and they tried to propose a Jewish hero and savior who believed in turning the other cheek and rendering unto Caesar what was Caesar's, walking an extra mile with the centurion's backpack, or saying that the centurion who owned slaves has the greatest faith in all of Israel, and many other similar pro-Roman, anti-Jew orientations within the Gospels, and that they were written by the Roman Caesars of the Flavian dynasty, most likely, but especially kind of the shadow emperor there, Arius Piso, whose father started out the program. And you can get a glimpse of this if you read Josephus, who Christians cite as a corroborating, source for Jesus' existence, not recognizing that Josephus, according to his own autobiography, was a member of the Roman imperial court after 69 AD, was adopted by Emperor Vespasian and lived at Rome the rest of his life, I believe. But if you dig a little bit further, then you kind of discover that Josephus didn't really exist either, and that he was just a pen name of probably Arius Piso, and the rest of his family, who made it their life's work to promote this new Roman religion and to foist it on the Jews, and eventually to foist it on the Gentiles, especially the soldiers and the slaves living there in Rome. Many of the Roman nobles were amongst the first royal family, even were amongst the first Christian converts because they were faking it. They were trying to promote the religion. They knew it was a fraud from the start. And you can figure out that it's a fraud by comparing the works of Josephus with the Gospels. Read, and that's what this guy Michael Menescotts has done. He basically crossed the book of Luke with Josephus's book Wars of the Jews, or Jewish War. And you can also glean this, as two other scholars have done independently, figured out that it was Arius Piso by thoroughly reading all of the sources from the first century, including the notes that they passed back and forth to each other, and recognizing that they all used aliases. And so you have to be able to kind of play the shell game with names. You have to be able to keep track of, each one of these people has several different names. But it comes down to most likely that the Gospels were written by Arius Piso. Much of the rest of the New Testament, especially the epistles of Paul, were written by Pliny the Younger. And they write back and forth to each other, and they kind of reveal the game there. Even though you kind of have to use a little bit of coded, you have to kind of break down some of the code. But you can tell that they're writing the same. But so what Menescotts does is he finds all the parallels between Jewish war and the Gospels, and maps them out on a graph, and then shows you that the Romans actually signed their name to this fraud between the book of Luke and Jewish war. It spells APTVS. Don't exactly know what that is, but I think maybe Arius Piso Titus Vespasianus. Titus and Vespasian were the two emperors, military generals during the war, but then afterward they became emperors. The Flavian dynasty, which also included Titus's brother Domitian. But I don't think Domitian was really terribly down for the whole project, although he might have, according to Joseph Atwill, he might have been involved in especially Revelation. But according to Reuchlin and Piso, Roman Piso, it was written by Arius Piso's son, Julius. Revelation, way up into about 140 AD, 137 to 140 AD, the early years of Emperor Antoninus Pius, who was also known as Suetonius, who was another of the small group of Romans who actually mentioned the existence of Jesus, which Christians rely upon for the existence of Jesus because there isn't any evidence for it. All the evidence that they have for it can be, more or less explained away because it's the Romans. And if this is a Roman psyop, well, they're going to back up their psyop. So what we're doing, what Menescats does in this book, is he goes over painstakingly every parallel. He found about 250 different parallels between the book of Luke and Wars of the Jews. And he shows them to you. Some of them are a little bit weak. Some of them are well hidden but detailed. And some of them are totally obvious. Not too many of them are totally obvious. I think they wanted it to be hidden, at least while they were still alive. But I believe they wanted it to be discovered eventually. And I think that they would probably be surprised to find out that almost 2,000 years later it hasn't been discovered. Because, you have... it's a secret that's being guarded. It's not so much the Christian fraud that's being guarded. People are able to take shots at Christianity, but you have to take a side. You have to either be pro-Christian or anti-Christian. You can't just say it's irrelevant. That's not one of the answers. To say that it's not valid. The language in there is propaganda. None of it happened, and it's not valid. That's not, I actually think, I see it as a total mixed bag, that it is what you call a limited hangout. They had to put a lot of useful stuff in there, or else it wouldn't have been acceptable to the Jews or anybody else. So they put all their Stoicism and Neoplatonism into it, and a lot of other stuff from various mythologies, especially Krishna, from Hindu philosophy, but all over the world. They put a lot of stuff in there from the zodiac and the astrology. There's a lot of stuff in there having to do with entheogens, and so there's and a lot of stuff having to do with like the Jewish king of the Jews. Not a god, but the heir to the Jewish legacy, which is talked about a lot in kind of Dead Sea Scrolls line of thinking. So there's a lot of different coded language. There's many different layers. Whoever put together the Gospels was a complete genius, but it's an evil genius, because if you're following this and you believe in it, they're mocking you, they are ridiculing you, and they're cursing you. They're laughing at you because it's a complete fraud, and it can be proven as such. And until it is, you will continue to follow this to your detriment. I also forgot to mention all the pornographic jokes that are also embedded into the script of the New Testament. Roman Piso found like almost 200 examples of pornographic jokes in the New Testament. So they wrote the whole thing, and it's doctored. It's doctored up in every possible way. Okay, now we're going to get into the Menescots going through some parallels. I had a little bit of difficulty again with my photocopying skills, and it's hard to see the page. These pages are so, it's just not a good layout in my opinion, and it's very difficult to take pictures of these pages, and it's very difficult to see the pages. I'm literally going through like one page a day here on this because I babble so much, but also because there's so much text on one page. But to start out with, notice here that Jewish War explicitly describes Jews as beasts gone mad. And when they kill each other, this is divine justice. But when comparing the stories, the sick message goes a step further by equating the Jews as devils and suggesting that anyone killing them is working for us. I mention this partly to show the author's objectives. Turn the initiates against the previous evil generation of Jews, to use Jesus' phrase, and also partly because recognizing the sick humor helps us follow the thread of how Luke is parodying Jewish war. Okay, so that's also another point, is that, you could say, oh, Jewish war is parodying Luke, so that means the Jewish war was written after Luke. But no, they were written approximately the same time, and Luke parodies Jewish war back, which means that they were written at exactly the same time. If one is parodying the other, and back at, it goes both ways, then they were written at the same time by the same people, in communication with each other. Okay, so that was kind of looking at the last parallel that we went through yesterday, but the next parallel is equally interesting in that it helps us understand what Jesus' good news really means. So he's starting here with Jewish War, paragraph 531. It's book 4, chapter 11, paragraph 5. Then Vespasian went to Alexandria and received good news from Rome regarding the death of Emperor Vitellius, and Vespasian being hailed as emperor. In the text, the word that's used in Greek is evangelion, which most certainly means good news of military victory. The same paragraph also details Vespasian's departure from Judea, involving passing through and staying at 6 named cities, where they say he went through the towns. Okay, so that is evangelion, good news of military victory. These two paragraphs similarly discuss sharing. Now this is going back to paragraph 525 and 529, so going back a handful of paragraphs. These two paragraphs similarly discuss the sharing of the good news of Titus and Vespasian's military victory. One discusses Vespasian's departure from Judea and passing from one city to another. Now, when we go to Luke, we go to chapter 9, verses 6 and 7. And they departed and went through the towns, preaching the good news and healing everywhere. Note that the original Greek text uses the term evangelizomai, whose conventional meaning was announcing good news of military victory. Now, if you look at what's said there in Luke 9, chapter 9, verse 6. And they departed and went through the towns, which is something that Vespasian did here, where he in paragraph 525. Vespasian's departure from Judea, it's that word evangelion is used, the Greek word. But then it says they went through the towns, preaching the good news and healing everywhere. Now, if you remember the last set of parallels that we went through in the wars of the Jews, they saw the Romans saw the Jews as really like a disease, and they like a disease of wickedness. And so when they're killing Jews, they're actually seeing it as being a healing. So this is I believe that's kind of an inside jab there, preaching the good news and healing everywhere. It's referring to Jesus and I guess the disciples. But it's the same thing. It's a parallel thing to what Titus and Vespasian are doing, going through the towns and butchering Jews. For them, that is healing everywhere. And so remember that one of the main tropes of these parallels is that the 3-year ministry of Jesus is mirrored by the 3-year military campaign of Titus. So wherever Jesus goes, Titus goes. What Jesus prophesies, Titus fulfills the prophecy. So Titus is really written into these books as the second coming of Jesus. And that's why Menescott says that, so, when we're looking at, the apocalypse or Revelation, we're expecting it to happen right now or in the future. It happened in the first century, at the end of the first century, just like Jesus said it would, before the generation, before the next generation is passed on or whatever is what he said. So the fulfillment of Jesus' prophecies was done already in the first century by Titus. And that is what Menescott says their overall strategy is, to get people hooked on the Word of God, on Jesus, and as first a hero, and then as a savior, and then show that his prophecies are being fulfilled by Titus. And so it kind of makes Jesus a secondary character, and Titus is the second coming. And then show that Jesus is a fiction entirely, and so then you have them worshiping the emperor, pure, what he calls pure emperor worship. That isn't as important to me, but it's an interesting theory. But the main thing to me is that it's the Romans that did it. And this is like abundant proof of them having done it, or at least abundant evidence. You can assess it for yourself. If you think these parallels are, random, and that the graphing out the parallels and having them form 5 letters is random or contrived, then that's up to you. You see it, but as long as you examine the evidence, and if the evidence isn't good enough for you, I don't know what to say to you. It's to me it's like Santa Claus. At a certain point you see it and then you can't really believe it anymore. And there's exactly the same amount of evidence for Santa Claus as there is for Jesus. Okay, now he goes on in his analysis. It is well established that the word evangelion or evangelion, I guess there's two L's, evangelion, conventionally meant good news of military victory, as per the Roman tradition. Although Christians tend to ignore the violent connotations of this and assume that Jesus meant it in a non-military sense, just as good news. However, by comparing these passages, we can see that when Jesus talks of announcing his good news, evangelion, this is a metaphor for Vespasian's evangelion, which is indeed good news of military victory. This shows us once again that Jesus' good news is a parody of Vespasian's victories over the Jews, rather than vice versa. Initial converts to this secrecy cult would be told it was a story of the good news of Jesus, but once they had been initiated into the more secret layers of the cult and had been led to accept Titus as Jesus' second coming, they would then see the gospel, Jesus' gospel, as the good news of Vespasian's military victory over Judea. But as riddles with hidden meaning go, that has nothing on the next one, which contrasts Jesus' famous story of the Good Samaritan with how Titus, having earlier come through and conquered Samaria, came to the aid of his legion to save them from what Jewish war calls the Jewish robbers, the Jews who stole Judea from Rome. All right. This is in Jewish War 541 and 2, which is Book 5, Chapter 2, Paragraph 4 and 5. The Jews, led by their generals, who Josephus is always calling robbers, the Jews, led by their generals, came down from Jerusalem and killed many Romans. Titus came to help them, and when the Roman soldiers scattered, Titus rode among the Jews and fought them himself. And then Titus also stood at the front of the Roman line to defend their camp. So it must be told, this is the analysis, so it must be told that Titus saved the entire legion twice from these robbers, meaning in each of the two cases, the person deserving of their love was Titus. So in essence, the future Flavian emperor showed his face twice to protect the men. Okay, once when he fought the Jews led by their generals, and then once going through Samaria, he had to help a legion. Okay, now we're going to the book of Luke, chapter 10, verse 30. Jesus said, "Love the Lord your God and love your neighbor." What does it say? Love your neighbor. Yeah, okay. So they asked him to clarify the term neighbor. Jesus said, "A man went down from Jerusalem and fell among outlaws. wounded him and left him half dead. Unlike two examples of Jews, a Samaritan came to help. And the story indicates that he had a horse. So, and he rode to an inn, giving 2 Roman denarii, coins. Notice that almost all denarii showed the face of an emperor, and Vespasian and Titus similarly had denarii minted with their faces on it. So this hints at the idea of a Flavian emperor's face being presented twice to prove or to protect a fallen man. That's a riddle. I mean, sometimes you're wondering if that's just a little bit coincidental, but it could definitely be a riddle too. And like I said the other day, you have to kind of go back into the mindset of these first century Romans. They made literal sport of puns and parodies and satires and hidden coded language. This was like a sport for them, and it was too for the Jews, especially in a later period. They might have gotten this from the Romans, but the Romans were very big into these kind of word games. So when you say, in Wars of the Jews, you show that Titus had to show his face twice in order to protect his men. And then in Luke, he presents 2 Roman coins. So he's presenting the emperor's face twice to protect a fallen man. So Jesus concluded, "He who helped those attacked by the robbers and fell on him is the neighbor that you should love," is what he says. So, again, it's a limited hangout. It's a mixed bag. This is not like some kind of curse. You can use it for, you can, especially with most Christians